I wasn't supposed to be on that rooftop. That's the first thing you need to understand. I wasn't on the roster. My name wasn't in the briefing folder. The men down on the street had no idea I was up there, lying flat against warm tar, my cheek pressed to the stock of a rifle that, technically, I shouldn't have been carrying at all. But there I was, and I'm glad I was, because if I hadn't broken every single rule in the book that morning, a lot of people would have died. Let me back up. It was a Thursday in late June. London was having one of those weeks where the sky couldn't make up its mind. Hot in the morning, drizzle by noon, sun again by tea. Tourists were everywhere. You could hear them before you saw them, the cameras, the laughter, the kids being told to stand still for one more photo, just one more, come on, Lily, look at the camera, love. I was on leave. Real leave, the kind where you actually try to forget what your job is, 3 weeks off. I had a small flat near Pimlico, a thriller novel I was halfway through, and a girlfriend who was visiting her mother in Dublin. The plan was simple: walk around the city, eat something fried, sleep in. That morning I'd gone for a walk through St. James's Park. I cut up past the lake, came around toward the mall, and got caught in the usual crowd outside Buckingham Palace. The changing of the guard was about to start. I almost turned around. I'd seen it 100 times, but something, call it habit, call it instinct, I don't know, made me stop. I leaned on the railing near the Victoria Memorial and watched. The guards came in formation, the way they always do. Red tunics, black bearskins, that strange floating walk they do where the boots barely seem to touch the ground. Tourists pressed against the gates. A guy next to me was filming on his phone, narrating in what I think was Portuguese. A little girl was on her dad's shoulders, eating an ice lolly that was melting down her wrist. And then I noticed her. The new one. She was at the end of the line, smaller than the others, but you wouldn't say small, compact, the way some people are. She kept her chin tucked just slightly, the way I do when I'm scanning a tree line. Her eyes weren't doing what the other guards' eyes were doing. The others were locked forward, fixed on a point 1,000 yards away. Hers were moving, quick little flicks. Left, right, up, back, down, left again. I noticed because I do the same thing. I should tell you who I am, but I'd rather not give my name. Let's just say I served 12 years, 3 tours, the kind of work where you don't write home about what you did. I was trained as a marksman first, and then as something a bit more specific than that. I won't get into it. The point is, I know how to read a person. I know what fear looks like, and I know what readiness looks like, and I know the difference. She wasn't afraid, she was ready. Which meant something was wrong. I watched her for maybe 40 seconds, long enough to see her hand twitch once, just once, near her belt. Not a real movement. The kind of micro-movement a person makes when they're checking that something is still where they put it. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't move yet. I just stood there with my hands in my pockets, looking like every other tourist. But I started doing the thing I was trained to do, which is scan outward. Concentric circles. Closest first, then wider. There was a man across the road from her. Mid-30s, dark jacket, hood up despite the warm air. He was holding a paper cup of coffee. He hadn't taken a sip. The cup was still steaming. He wasn't looking at the guards. He was looking past them toward the palace gate, and his lips were moving, just barely, like he was counting under his breath. I shifted my eyes. There were 2 more. One on the far corner near the statue. A woman this time. She had a tote bag. The bag wasn't hanging right. There was weight in it that shouldn't have been there. It was pulling the strap in a way a normal bag doesn't pull. The third one I almost missed. He was sitting on a low wall, pretending to fix his shoe, but his shoe was already tied. I watched him do the bow twice. Nobody ties their shoe twice unless they're stalling. 4, maybe 5. I couldn't see them all yet, but I knew there were more. And then I looked back at the new guard, the small one, the one whose eyes wouldn't stop moving, and I realized she had clocked all of them too. Her hand twitched again, closer to her belt this time. That's when I knew. She wasn't a normal guard. Not in the way the others were, she was something else, and she knew what was about to happen. I'll tell you about her properly later. For now just know her name was Ava, and she had been doing ceremonial duty for exactly 11 days. That's it. 11 days. Before that she'd been in a country I'm not going to name, doing work that doesn't appear in any record. She'd been pulled out and reassigned. Standard rotation, they said. Arrest posting. Stand at the gate. Look pretty in the photos. Let the body recover. She wasn't the kind of person who could ever really rest. People like us don't. But she was trying. She told me later, when we sat in the hospital cafeteria 3 days afterward, that she'd been looking forward to the boredom. She said she'd actually been excited about how boring it was supposed to be. She laughed when she said it. The laugh sounded a bit hollow. I understand the feeling. Back on the mall, I started moving. Not fast, not in a way anyone would notice. I just drifted backward through the crowd, out of the front row, then sideways, behind a tour group from somewhere in the Midwest. A woman with a Detroit Tigers cap shoulder-checked me by accident and apologized about 6 times. I kept moving. I needed elevation. There's a building just off the mall. You've probably walked past it 100 times without noticing. Sandstone front, 6 floors. The kind of office building that has more brass on its door than people inside. I knew the side entrance. I knew the side entrance because a friend of mine, also formerly of the same line of work, was working private security there now. He'd given me a tour once, 2 months back, over a bottle of something Scottish. He'd shown me the roof. The roof had a clear line of sight to the front of Buckingham Palace. That detail had stuck with me. The way certain details stick with people like us, even when we're not on duty, especially when we're not on duty. I jogged down the side street, not a full sprint, a controlled jog. I went around the back, hit the staff entrance, pressed the buzzer. Yeah. Mate, it's me. A pause, then a click. I went up the stairs 3 at a time. He met me on the 4th floor. He's a big man, my friend, and he doesn't startle easy. But when he saw my face, he didn't ask any questions. He just said, "What do you need?" "The roof, and whatever you've got in your locker." He looked at me for half a second, 1/2 second. Then he turned and walked. That's what 12 years of trust gets you. No questions, not yet. What he had in his locker, it turned out, was a rifle. Not a service rifle. Not anything official, a personal one. He used to compete. Long range. Civilian competitions, very legal, very documented. He kept it in a hard case at work because his wife didn't like having it in the house anymore. She'd had a bad year, he said, and didn't want to look at it. He pulled the case out, he opened it, he looked at me. "This is bad, isn't it?" he said. "Yes." "You sure?" "Yes." He handed it over. Then he handed me a magazine and then a second one. He didn't have many rounds, maybe 20 in total. "I'm calling it in," he said. "Do. You shouldn't be doing this." "I know." He nodded once. Then he picked up his phone and started dialing numbers I didn't ask about. I took the rifle and went up. The roof was hot. The tar was soft from the morning sun. I crawled the last few feet, the way you crawl when you don't want to be skylined against the horizon. I found a spot behind a ventilation unit. I set up. I won't bore you with the technical bits. Bipod down, round in the chamber. Scope adjusted for the range, which I'd already estimated in my head walking down the side street. About 400 meters to the gate. Wind was light, coming from the west, maybe 2 miles an hour, gusting to 4. The flag on the palace roof was barely moving. I found Ava in the scope. She was still in position, still small at the end of the line, still doing the thing with her eyes. Then I started looking for the others. The man with the coffee, first ring, I marked him. The woman with the tote bag, second ring, marked her. The man tying his shoe, third ring, marked him. I found a fourth one I hadn't seen from the ground. He was in a car. A silver hatchback parked on a side street I could only see from up here. The engine was running. He was watching the gate in his rearview mirror. And then I found the fifth. The fifth one was the one that made my breath go funny. He was inside the palace railings. He was wearing a high-visibility vest, the kind the maintenance crews wear, and he had a clipboard, and he was standing about 10 feet behind the guards on the palace side. He looked like he belonged. He looked exactly like he belonged. If I hadn't been looking specifically for someone who didn't fit, I would have skipped right over him. But he was holding the clipboard the wrong way. The clip was at the bottom. Nobody who actually uses a clipboard holds it like that. And his other hand wasn't visible. It was behind his back. I sat with that information for maybe 3 seconds. 5 people, coordinated, one inside the perimeter. Coffee man with something in the cup, tote bag woman with something in the bag, shoelace man stalling for a reason, hatchback man ready to drive, and clipboard man positioned to do whatever the actual plan was. And the new guard at the end of the line, Ava, had seen at least 3 of them, maybe 4. She hadn't seen clipboard man yet because clipboard man was behind her. I had to make a decision. Protocol said, "Call it in, get off the roof, let the professionals handle it." Protocol also said, this was about to happen in less than 2 minutes, judging by the way they were tightening up. There wasn't time. This is where I broke the first rule. I won't pretend I agonized over it. I didn't. The decision was already made by the time I'd finished spotting the 5th man. I think part of me had made the decision the second I saw Ava's hand twitch near her belt. I keyed the radio my friend had clipped to my chest before I went up. It was on his company's channel, but it was the best I had. "This is Overwatch," I said. "Possible coordinated attack front of palace, 5 suspects. I have eyes on all of them." A pause, a voice came back, female, calm, professional. "Sir, who is this?" "Doesn't matter, listen carefully. Coffee cup at the South Crossing, hooded male. Tote bag, female, northeast corner, weight in the bag is wrong. Male near the wall, faking a shoelace. Silver hatchback running engine on the side street. And one inside your perimeter wearing high-vis with a clipboard. Behind the guards, right hand hidden." A longer pause this time. "Stand by," she said. "I don't have standby," I said. "They're about to move." "Sir, I'm going to do something in about 30 seconds. I want you to know it's me. Tell the response teams. Tell them I am friendly. Tell them not to engage me. Do you understand?" I could hear her breathing. I could hear someone in the background, a man's voice, fast and tense. "What is your position?" she said. I told her. "Stay there. Do not engage. Do not." That's when clipboard man moved. He moved fast. He stepped forward behind Ava's commanding officer, a sergeant major I would later learn was named Whitlock, a man with 28 years in the regiment, 2 daughters, and a fishing cabin in Wales, and he put something to the back of Whitlock's neck. A pistol, small, suppressed. He didn't fire. He grabbed Whitlock's collar with his free hand and pulled him backward, into the cover of the gatehouse arch. It happened in maybe 3 seconds. The crowd didn't even notice. The other guards didn't move. They're trained not to break formation for anything short of a direct order or a direct threat to the royals. And clipboard man knew that. He knew exactly how the protocol worked. He knew he had a window. Ava saw it. I saw her see it. Her eyes went wide for exactly 1 heartbeat. Then they went calm again. The kind of calm you only get from training. Her hand finally went all the way to her belt. And on the street, coffee man dropped his cup. The cup hit the pavement and the lid came off, and what was inside wasn't coffee at all. It was a fine gray powder that puffed up in a small cloud as the cup bounced. Tote bag woman unzipped her bag. Shoelace man stood up. Hatchback man revved his engine. And I exhaled slow, the way you exhale when you've already decided what you're about to do, and you just need your body to catch up. I put the crosshairs on Coffee Man first. The thing about doing what I do, what I used to do, is that the world goes very quiet right before you pull the trigger. It's not silence, it's something stranger. You can still hear the sounds. The crowd, the cars in the distance, the gulls fighting over a chip somebody dropped. But the sounds stop meaning anything. They turn into wallpaper. The only thing that has any weight is the small circle in the middle of your scope. In that small circle was a man with a paper cup, and the paper cup was no longer in his hand. His right hand was already moving inside his jacket. I made the call. Not him first. I lifted off him and swung the scope 8 degrees right to Clipboard Man, who was now backing into the gatehouse arch with Whitlock as his shield. Clipboard Man was the controller. I could see it now. He was the brain. The others were waiting for him to give the next move. If I took him out first, the others would freeze for at least 1 second, maybe 2. That gap would give Ava and the rest of the guard time to react. But there was a problem. Whitlock was directly in front of him. Clipboard Man had pulled him in close. The pistol was pressed against the side of Whitlock's neck. From my angle, all I had was the right side of Clipboard Man's head and his shooting shoulder. 2 inches of skull, basically, at 400 meters, through the gap between Whitlock's bearskin and Whitlock's collar. I'd taken harder shots, but I'd taken them in places where, if I missed, the only person I'd hurt was a stranger I would never have to think about. This was different. If I missed by an inch right, the round went into the gatehouse stone and ricocheted into the crowd. If I missed by an inch left, the round went into Whitlock's head. If I missed high, it cleared the arch and hit the palace facade, which meant a window or, God help me, a person inside. If I missed low, it went into Whitlock's shoulder. There was no good missing. I had to not miss. I want to be honest with you. In that exact second, I considered not taking the shot. I considered it for the time it takes a heart to beat once, but I considered it. I am not a hero. I'm a man on a roof who used to do this for the government, who is now on leave, who is breaking the law every second he stays on that roof. I had a girlfriend in Dublin. I had a thriller novel on my nightstand. I had a life that did not include this rooftop or this rifle or this shot. But Ava had a hand on her belt and her commander had a gun to his neck, and there were 4 other people about to start something terrible. And if I did nothing, all of that was going to happen anyway, just without me. I'd rather be the person who tried. So I breathed out slow, the last third of a breath, the way you do, and I held at the bottom, and I made my finger heavy on the trigger, the way you do. And then Clipboard Man moved his head 2 inches. He was talking, probably into a hidden mic, probably to his team. I don't know what he said, but the small movement of his head turning slightly opened up the shot. I took it. The report was sharp. Rifles always sound smaller in the open air than people think. It cracked once and was gone. Clipboard Man went down sideways. Whitlock dropped with him because Clipboard Man had been holding his collar. I had already shifted the scope before Whitlock even hit the ground. Coffee Man first ring, easiest shot was reaching into his jacket. I put 2 on him. Center mass, then a follow-up. He spun and fell against the railing. I swung left. Tote bag woman had the bag open. I could see metal inside it now. Long metal. The kind of long metal that you do not want a person in a crowd to have. I held my breath for a half second and put one through her shoulder, not center mass. I didn't want to kill her. I wanted her arm to stop working. She dropped the bag and screamed, and the metal inside the bag clattered to the pavement. Shoelace Man bolted. He just ran. He didn't even try to do whatever his job had been. He ran into the crowd, shoving an elderly couple aside, and disappeared behind a tour bus. I let him go. There were too many people. I wasn't going to put a round through that crowd to catch a runner. Hatchback Man revved harder. The car lurched forward. He was going to ram the gate. I had to be careful here. The car was moving. Hitting a moving driver through a windshield at 400 meters with the angle I had was not a guaranteed shot, and if I missed and only wounded him, his foot might still go down on the accelerator. I aimed for the engine block. 3 rounds quick, bang, bang, bang. The bonnet of the hatchback popped open like a startled cat. Steam came up immediately. The car coasted forward maybe 10 more feet before the engine seized completely, and it rolled to a stop against a bollard. Hatchback man jumped out and started running, same direction as Shoelace man. I let him go too. Total time from the first shot to the silence, about 6 seconds. Now about Ava. I want to tell you what she did because this is really her story, not mine. I was a guy on a roof. She was the one in the actual line of fire. The second clipboard man dropped. Ava broke formation. The other guards held their positions because they hadn't received an order and they didn't yet know what was happening. Ava did the opposite. She went down to one knee fast, and she drew the pistol she had been carrying under her tunic. Yes, under her ceremonial tunic. That was not regulation, that was her. That was the thing she would later admit to me in the hospital cafeteria, that she had been carrying a sidearm she was technically not authorized to carry for those 11 days, because something in her gut had told her she should. She drew, and she put herself between the gatehouse and the crowd. She didn't shoot. There was nothing to shoot at by then, but she covered Whitlock with her own body while 2 of the other guards finally moved. They finally registered what had happened and dragged him backward into the courtyard. Whitlock was alive, bruised, shaken, and going to need a stiff drink for about a year, but alive. While the other guards moved Whitlock, Ava held the gate. She held the gate alone, with a pistol in a 2-handed grip, in full ceremonial dress, while a crowd of around 200 tourists realized something had gone very wrong and started to scream. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at the bodies. She just held position, eyes scanning, the way she had been doing for 40 seconds before any of this started. The first armed response units arrived 90 seconds later. She held the gate for 90 seconds. I was still on the roof. This was the part I'd been dreading, not the shooting, the after. I had used a civilian's competition rifle to fire 7 rounds in central London. I had killed at least 2 people. I had wounded 1. I had damaged a car. I was an off-duty, off-roster, off-everything former operator on a rooftop without permission, without a warrant, without any kind of legal authority to be doing what I had just done. I knew exactly how this was about to go. I put the rifle down. I put it down very carefully on the tar in plain view. I put my hands behind my head. I stayed kneeling. The radio crackled. Overwatch, this is Control. Are you still in position? Yes. Stay exactly where you are. Hands visible. 2 units are coming to you. Do not move. Copy. I stayed. I could hear sirens now. Lots of them. The way you hear sirens in a city when something has happened that the city is going to be talking about for a year. I waited. It took them about 4 minutes to get to me. They came up the stairs hard. I heard the boots. I heard the breach team stack up at the rooftop door. I heard the door bang open. I didn't turn my head. Do not move. Show us your hands. They're up, I said, calm as I could. I am cooperating. The weapon is on the ground 6 feet to my left. I am not armed. There is a radio on my chest. Your control has been speaking to me. Down on your face now. I went down slowly, hands always visible, cheek to the tar. I was zip-tied within 10 seconds, searched within 20. They got me up, walked me to the door, took me down the stairs and out through the back of the building where 2 police vehicles and a black unmarked van were waiting. They put me in the van. I didn't argue, I didn't ask questions, I knew the drill. The van pulled away. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for about 2 hours, was that my radio call had been routed faster than I expected. The woman who'd answered me on the channel was a private security supervisor, but she had a direct line to the Metropolitan Police's counterterror desk because of the building she worked at. She had called them inside of 10 seconds of hearing me. They had taken her seriously, which is honestly the part I'm still surprised by, because anonymous radio calls about coordinated attacks on the palace are exactly the kind of thing that gets dismissed 9 times out of 10. But she was good. She'd been a dispatcher in another life. She knew how to read a voice, and she said later in the inquiry that she had known within 5 seconds that I was real. That's the only reason I didn't get shot on that roof. I want to be very clear about that. If she had been any less competent than she was, the breach team would have come up that stairwell expecting an attacker, not an asset. The smallest mistake on her part, a hesitation, a wrong word, and I would have been a body in a body bag, and the news that night would have been about a lone gunman on a rooftop in Westminster. She saved my life. She saved it by being good at her job. I never met her in person. I learned her name later. I sent her flowers eventually when things had calmed down. She sent a card back that just said, "Doing my job. Glad you did yours." I keep that card in a drawer. The van. I was in the van for about 35 minutes. Nobody spoke to me. I sat in the back, hands still tied, ankles tied to a bolt in the floor. There was a man in tactical gear sitting across from me. He didn't make eye contact. He had his weapon across his lap. I understood. I would have done the same in his position. We pulled into an underground garage. Concrete, stripped lighting, the kind of place that doesn't show up on Google Maps. They walked me up 2 flights of stairs and into a room with no windows and 1 table and 2 chairs. A man came in, 50s, suit, tired eyes. He sat down across from me. He looked at me for a long time without saying anything. Then he said, "You know how much trouble you're in?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Tell me your name." I told him. He sighed. It was a long sigh. He rubbed his eyes. "Of course it's you," he said. I didn't say anything to that. He pulled out a folder. He didn't open it. He just put his hand on it. "Walk me through it," he said, "from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the walk through the park, about stopping at the railing, about noticing Ava. I told him about the 4 or 5 suspects. I told him about going to my friend's building. I told him about the rifle. I told him about the radio call. I told him about the shots in order and why I took each one in the order I took them. He listened. He didn't write anything down. There was a camera in the corner, blinking red, doing the writing for him. When I was done, he said, "How did you spot the woman, the new guard?" She wasn't standing like a ceremonial guard. She was standing like a shooter who'd been told to act like a ceremonial guard. "And you knew the difference?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "She saw you take the shot on the man behind her commander," he said. "From the angle, the way he fell. She knew it came from elevation. She told us in her statement that she looked up at the rooftops and thanked God." I looked at the floor. "Did Whitlock?" I started. "He's fine, bruised, concussion from the fall. He'll be back on duty within the month." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. He watched me let it out. "You shouldn't have been there," he said. "I know. You shouldn't have had that rifle." "I know. You broke about 9 separate laws in the span of about 10 minutes." "I know." He looked at me, long, steady. "Thank you," he said. That's not how I expected the conversation to go. I looked up at him. He was already standing. He picked up the folder. "There's going to be a process," he said. "There has to be, you understand." "Yes." "You're going to spend some time in a room. You're going to be asked the same questions by a lot of different people. Some of them will be angry at you. Some of them will be grateful. Most of them will be both at the same time." "I understand." For what it's worth, he said, the people upstairs already know who you are. They know what you used to do. They know why you saw what you saw when nobody else did. None of that gets you out of the process. But it means the process won't end the way you think it might. He paused at the door. Get some rest, he said. We'll be back in a couple of hours. He left. I sat in that room with my hands on the table and tried to remember how to breathe normally. I stayed in that room for about 6 hours. Different people came in and out. A woman with a clipboard, a real one, held right way up, with the clip at the top, went through the timeline with me twice. A man in a uniform I didn't recognize asked me about my training, and about my service, and about the dates of my last psychological evaluation. Someone brought me a cup of tea. Someone else brought me a sandwich, which I didn't eat. Around hour 4, they cut the zip ties off my wrists. That was the moment I knew, in my gut, that I wasn't going to prison. I didn't say anything. I just rubbed the marks on my wrists and kept answering the same questions, in the same order, the same way. Around hour 6, a different man came in. Older than the first one. Bigger. The kind of man who fills a doorway without trying. He sat down across from me and looked at me the way an uncle looks at a nephew who's done something extremely stupid but also extremely necessary. Walk with me, he said. I walked with him. We went out of the room, down a corridor into a lift, up 4 floors, down another corridor, and into a different room. This one had windows. The sun was setting outside. London was doing that gold thing it does, where every brick on every building looks warmer than it really is. He poured us both a glass of water. Your friend who lent you the rifle, he said. We've spoken to him. He's not in trouble. He did exactly what he should have done. He called it in immediately. His call was logged at the same time as yours. The two of you, between you, gave us a 30-second head start on the response. Good. The competition rifle is being held as evidence. He'll get it back when we're done with it. Okay. The 2 men you killed, clipboard and coffee, have been identified. We're not going to talk about who they were yet, but I can tell you they were not first-time offenders. They were not someone's misguided son. They were exactly the kind of people you assumed they were. I nodded. The woman you shot in the shoulder will live. She's already talking. She is telling us things that are very useful. Good. The 2 who ran, we have one of them. The shoelace one. Picked up at a bus station in Croydon 4 hours ago. The driver of the hatchback we're still looking for, but we will find him. He sipped his water. What you did, he said, was illegal. Yes. It was also necessary. I hope so. It was. The bag the woman had been carrying contained a modified submachine gun and 4 magazines. The cup the first man dropped contained a chemical agent that, in an open-air environment with the right wind, would have incapacitated everyone in a 40-meter radius. The pistol the man inside the perimeter had, the one you took the headshot on, was loaded with a round we have not seen in this country before. We are still analyzing it. He set the glass down. They were going to take a hostage to the gate. They were going to demand something. We don't know what yet. The plan, as best we can reconstruct it, was to use the chemical agent to incapacitate the response, use the submachine gun on the guards, and use the hostage to bargain. Hatchback was the extraction. The man who ran on foot was probably a secondary distraction. How many would have died? I asked. He looked at me for a moment. A lot, he said. I let that sit. He let it sit too. After a while he said, there is going to be no public statement about you. You will not be in the news. Your name will not appear in any official document related to this incident. The shots are going to be attributed to a coordinated response by units already on scene. Your friend's rifle is going to disappear from the chain of evidence after analysis. Are we clear? Yes. You will be asked to sign certain documents. They will be very strict. You understand? I understand. Your leave is going to be extended, officially, with pay, for as long as we think you need. Thank you. And when you are ready to come back, if you want to come back, there is going to be a conversation. I looked at him. What kind of conversation? I said. He smiled just barely. The kind where we don't waste people like you on rooftops by accident, he said. He stood up, he held out his hand. I stood up too, I shook it. Go home, he said, sleep. Don't read the news for a few days, we'll be in touch. I didn't go home, actually. I went to the hospital. There was one person I needed to see. They had Ava in a private room on the 4th floor. There was a man in a suit outside the door who looked at me, looked at his phone, looked back at me and stepped aside without a word. Somebody had cleared me through. I knocked. Come in, she said. I went in. She was sitting up in the bed. She wasn't injured exactly. They were keeping her for observation, stress mostly. Her tunic was hanging over the back of a chair. Her bearskin was on the windowsill. She was wearing hospital pajamas, which looked deeply wrong on her, the way pajamas always look on people who you've only ever seen in uniform. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "It was you on the roof, wasn't it?" I sat down in the visitor's chair. Yes. She let out a breath, the kind of breath that has been waiting in your chest for hours. I thought so, she said. How? The angle of the shot on the man behind Sergeant Major Whitlock. It came from elevation from the west. I knew the rooftops. I knew which one. I knew it had to be a friendly because if it had been a hostile, we'd have all been dead in the next 2 seconds. So somebody up there was on our side. I just didn't know who. How did you spot them? I asked. The 4 on the street. She tilted her head. How did you? She said. I asked first. She smiled small, tired. The man with the coffee, she said. His shoes. His shoes. They were new, brand new, stiff. He was standing with his weight on the outside edges of his feet, the way you do when shoes haven't broken in yet. Nobody on a mission wears brand new shoes unless they had to buy them in a hurry, unless they had to throw away the old ones for some reason. That made me look at him properly. Once I looked at him properly, I saw the rest. I didn't say anything for a moment. That's better than anything I had, I said. You had something. Her bag was hanging wrong, the strap pull. Yes, she said. I saw that too after the shoes. We sat in silence for a minute or so. Then she said, Why were you there? On leave, walking through the park. I got caught in the crowd. You weren't on duty. No. You weren't supposed to be armed. No. You broke every rule in the book. Yes. She looked at me for a long time. Her eyes were very steady. I understood why they had picked her for the work she did before. People with eyes like that are rare. Thank you, she said. You held the gate, I said, for 90 seconds, alone, with a sidearm you weren't supposed to be carrying. You also broke every rule in the book. She almost laughed, not quite. I suppose we did, she said. We ended up in the hospital cafeteria a couple of hours later. She had been cleared to walk around. We got cups of tea that were too strong and a packet of biscuits that were too sweet, and we sat at a corner table by a window that looked out at a brick wall. She told me about the country she'd been in before. Not the name, just the shape of the work. Quiet stuff, watch and report, occasional protection details. Once, a thing that went wrong and she didn't say what it was, but I could see from her face that it was the reason she had been rotated. I told her about my time too, not much, just enough. We didn't need to say much. People like us recognize each other without needing the full story. You speak shorthand. You leave the gaps where the gaps belong. She said the boring posting at the palace had been a gift, and she'd been looking forward to it, and she felt guilty for being almost relieved that it had turned out not to be boring after all. She laughed when she said that. The laugh was the one I told you about earlier, the one that sounded a bit hollow. I told her I understood. She said, "Will you keep doing it, the work?" I thought about it. "They want me to," I said. "And I think I will." "Why?" I looked at her over the rim of my cup. "Because if I hadn't been on that walk this morning," I said, "we would be having this conversation in a very different room, or not at all." She nodded. "That's the right answer," she said. "The inquiry took 6 weeks. I sat in a lot of rooms. I signed a lot of documents. I told the story so many times the words stopped meaning anything. I was cleared eventually on every count that mattered. The competition rifle quietly disappeared from the evidence locker, the way I'd been told it would. My friend got a quiet visit from someone in a nice suit who thanked him on behalf of people he would never meet, and left him a small wooden box on his kitchen table that he won't talk about and I haven't asked about. Whitlock came back to duty 4 weeks after the incident. He sent me a card. It said, "I owe you a pint. When you're ready. I haven't cashed it in yet, but I will." Ava and I see each other now and then. Not romantically. I have a girlfriend, and Ava has someone too. A woman she met 3 years ago in a city she won't name. We meet for coffee every couple of months. We sit in places that have clear lines of sight to the door because we both still do that and we're not going to stop. We talk about ordinary things, books we're reading, holidays, whether her knee is bothering her this winter, whether my back is bothering me this winter. We don't talk about them all. Not because we can't, because we don't need to. The world doesn't know what happened that day. Not really. The papers ran a story about a security incident at Buckingham Palace that was handled by armed response units, with no casualties among the public. There were a couple of grainy phone videos that surfaced online for about a week before they disappeared. Conspiracy theorists had a field day for a month and then moved on to something else. That's how these things work. The truth gets put in a folder and the folder gets put in a drawer and the drawer gets locked. I'm telling you this story now, all these years later, and I'm being deliberately vague about a lot of details because I'm allowed to tell some of it but not all of it. You'll forgive me for the parts I've changed. You'll understand why. But I wanted somebody to know. I wanted somebody to know about Ava, who had been doing ceremonial duty for 11 days, and who carried a sidearm she wasn't supposed to carry because her gut told her to, and who held the gate alone for 90 seconds while the world spun. I wanted somebody to know about Whitlock, who went back to standing at that gate 4 weeks later as if nothing had happened, because that is what men like Whitlock do. I wanted somebody to know about my friend, who handed me a rifle without asking a single question, and who has not asked me a single question about that day since. I wanted somebody to know about the woman on the radio, whose name I never knew until later, who saved my life by being calm. And I wanted somebody to know that on a Thursday in late June, on a rooftop I wasn't supposed to be on, with a rifle I wasn't supposed to have, I broke every rule there is. And I would do it again. I would do it again tomorrow. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the moment before I took the first shot. The moment where the world went quiet and the only thing in the world was a small circle in the middle of a scope. I think about how easy it would have been to put the rifle down, to walk back down the stairs, to go home and have a cup of tea and let somebody else handle it. Somebody else wouldn't have handled it. There wasn't anybody else. There almost never is. That's the thing nobody tells you about this work. Most days you're not needed. Most days you walk through a park and you eat a sandwich and you read a book and the world goes on without you. But once in a long while, the world tilts and there is exactly one person in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, and that person has to decide whether to be there or to look away. I have looked away in my life, more times than I want to admit. That morning I didn't. That's the only thing I have to be proud of. That's enough.